Hey, are you ready to take a look at the Day 4 challenge on Advent of Code? Great, let's take a look. So this one is mainly about the manipulation and validation of data. So some people have said that so far out of all the challenges, this one is the closest to their actual job, their day-to-day responsibility. So we might not be looking at a lot of like algorithmic complexity kind of stuff in this one. However, we'll be looking at some basic data types like arrays and objects. We'll talk a little bit about the spread operator and how that can be used for manipulating data. We'll, of course, talk about functions, and we'll mention regular expressions a little bit as well, which I think we saw a bit of in the Day 2 challenge. Okay, so basically, in terms of what this is actually asking us, it's a question about passports. So we have some list of information here. And the idea is that the data is just really jumbled up. So they're kind of like random line breaks on each of these. If we take a look at the actual puzzle input, some of them are spread out across like 5 lines. Some of them are just a single line. So we'll have to deal with that in terms of manipulating this data. But something you'll notice is that each of these entries is spaced out by a double line break. Okay, so when we do our like dot split that we normally do for getting this stuff into the proper form, we'll probably want to split on a double line break instead of a single one like in previous challenges. Okay, so then once we have all that, what is it actually asking us to do? Well, basically, we just need to check if all of the required fields are present within the data. So we're given a list of fields here, and then we're actually later told that one of those fields is actually optional. So there should only be 7 that we really need to check for in this case. Okay, so basically, if an entry has all of the required fields, then it's considered valid. And we need to answer the question, how many of these passports are valid? Okay, so we're going to take a look at the IDE here. Now, the first thing you'll notice is that I've already pasted in the example here. I called it response text because I figured eventually we're going to be using this API stuff. We'll get into that a bit later, but basically the idea is we've got our response text over here. It's the name of the variable we're using. And so I think we're basically just going to use that later so that we don't need to change the variable name. I'm just calling it response text over here. Okay, let's go ahead and switch to our full IDE mode over here because I think we have all the data we need. Let's just say something like const input list is going to be assigned the value of response text dot split. And of course, we're doing the dot split with a double line break in this case instead of just one. I'll save and run this code. And it's not producing anything, or it's not console logging anything because I didn't ask it to. So that's an important part of programming. If you want something done, you have to ask for it. Okay, cool. So the first thing we notice is that there is a line break character at the beginning, and that's actually a really good reminder that we should put a dot trim in here because there could be white space at the beginning or end of the text that we get. So just to make sure it clears that out, we've got this dot trim built in that we can use on strings. Okay, cool. So that cleared out one of the entries for us. Let's go ahead and come up with a game plan here, actually. I don't want to get too deep into this without actually listing some steps. So the first thing we want to do is basically split this text into a list of entries, let's say, okay? So each of these entries might not be like a single line, but they are now split up into entries at least. Okay, the next thing we want to do is basically make each, well, actually, sorry. We've split up the list into entries. Now I want to split these. So like each separate line in here. So like this would be one line. This is another line. Even these other ones that are displaying as a single line, I believe, yeah, like right here, there's a /n character, \n. This one has a whole bunch of them. So like this one over here is actually 4 lines, it looks like, the entry at index 2 here. So basically I want to split the entries into lines. Split the entries into lines. And then basically after that, once they're lines, convert the lines into arrays, and then I want to amalgamate or combine the arrays into a single array. And then we want to convert that array, convert the resulting array into a set. Now, I think we saw a set data structure in one of the previous videos. We'll revisit that very shortly, but before we do, just the last thing we want to do, check if all the required fields are there. Okay, cool. And when I say there, I mean in the set. Okay, great. Okay, good stuff. So basically, first thing we've already done, we've split the text into a list of entries. Now we want to split the entries into their own lines. So I'll say const input list. I'll call this line list, I guess. I don't know. And it's basically going to be input list.map. So for each one of these things, each entry is going to be mapped to entry, not .map, .split. And I'm just going to split on the new line character so that basically each one of these things ends up being a list. So I'm just going to say line list in my console log, and let's just delete that other console log so that we don't get too much information. Okay, cool. So nice. Basically what we're getting is for each of these, we have an array of lines. Okay, so we have an array of lines, and now we want to convert the lines into arrays. So yeah, we've got our steps listed, and now we can sort of better visualize this. So let's just take a look at this one since it has quite a few lines here. So we want to convert each one of these things into an array. And when I say convert it to an array, I mean an array where like basically this would be an element of that array. This would be an element of the array. The next array would just have one element. The one after that would have 3 elements. There's 1, 2, 3. So basically the idea is, you may have guessed it, we're going to do a dot split on the space character. So let's try that now. We've got our line list. Let's say, const array list, I guess we could just call it. And it's going to be our, not input list, it's going to be line list dot map. And then for each entry is an array. So we would have to do a dot map on that. You know what? I'm thinking maybe we should just do both of those in one. So we'll split the entries into lines and convert the lines to arrays all in one. So basically we're doing entry.split. Entry.split is the thing that's giving us an array here. We'll just do a dot map directly on that. Dot map, and then for each one of these, it's a line. And then we'll just do line.split with the space character. Okay, so this is no longer line list. This is going to be array list. Maybe we'll call it something else, but we'll see. Okay, so console, no, I did not console log it. Let's console log it now. So console log of array list. There we go. Ooh, yeah, nice. Okay, great. So they're the types of arrays that we're looking for, right? Yeah, so basically we've got an array here. And then inside of that, we have several other arrays. For each of those, we have kind of like a key value pair. And those are split up, separated by commas. Like that's how entries are always separated inside of an array. So I could have just said these things are in an array. Anyway, the point is these are strings that kind of representing key value pairs. So that's kind of related to this part over here when we want to convert it into a set. We're just going to take the field names. We don't actually really care about the values themselves quite yet. Maybe in part 2, I don't know. We'll have to wait till we get there. But anyway, as for now, we've got this array list. The next thing we want to do is to combine these into a single array. Okay, so basically the way we're going to do that is instead of array list, I'm going to call this split list since they're split into separate lines. And then we'll call this one merged list. How about we do that? Okay, so basically this is going to be split list dot map, and each one of these is going to be an array of arrays, right? So I guess I'll just call this entry again, and we're just going to say what we want, okay, so an entry is like one of these, right? Like all of this is part of a single entry. So an entry is an array containing arrays. The way I want to deal with that is, well, I want to combine all of these together. I'm going to do a reduce. Okay, so similar to the way we've done, like if you had an array of numbers and you wanted to add them all up, we would do a reduce and then just give it a callback function that adds up all those numbers. In this case, basically, we're going to do something a little bit different, but not that much different. So basically, the idea is we're going to have, I'll just call this combined, and then this will just be like the current array. Okay, so we want to put these together. We're going to start with an initial value of combined that's just going to be an empty array. It's always good to have an initial value for your first argument here, just in case this list ends up being empty, okay? Because otherwise it'll throw an error if you don't put this in here. Okay, so combined and then array. So what we want to do is put these together. So we could say something like combined dot, I think concat we could do. Yeah, concat array. Can we do that? Is that an array built in we can use? I guess we're about to find out. So let's just go ahead and move this down and we'll say merged list is the thing that we want to be console logging. And what we expect is that it's basically just going to sort of flatten this, right? It's going to take each of these elements and sort of put them together inside this new result. So let's see if that ends up happening. Here we go. Yeah. Hey, that's pretty nice. Okay, good stuff. So yeah, not bad. What I want to talk about next is basically just another way that we can do this, because I personally find this .concat to be, I don't know, maybe a little bit awkward. It's maybe not entirely clear. I kind of like, I mean, generally speaking, I tend to favor ways of doing things very semantically, like where it should be obvious to the reader what it means, even if they're not really that familiar with the language. Okay, so basically, what we're saying here is we want a new array. It's going to contain all of the elements of the combined array as well as all of the elements of the current array. If you're wondering about the ... here and how that would be different if we didn't have the ... So actually, first of all, let's see if this works. That is probably a good first thing to check. Great. So this is working. Now, if we didn't have the ... how would that work? Well, basically what ... is doing is like dissolving away the arrayness of these things and just keeping the multiple values that were inside of it. So if we didn't have them, then it's going to say, okay, you want a new array containing these two things. And these two things are both arrays, right? So it's just saying, okay, I can do that. So I'll make a new array containing empty array and yeah, this array you've got on this current line. And then on the next time, it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I can do a one that has like that last result and then this current one over here. So basically, it would end up looking a lot like the original like split array thing that we had, except with more nesting. They're not all going to be at the same level. They're going to be like sort of, yeah, nested. So let's actually take a look at that because it's going to be a weird looking result. Yeah. Kind of strange, right? So basically, we want to make sure we keep the spread operator in there. Spread operator is really, really useful. We could do this for other things, like, for example, if you had 3 elements in an array and then you wanted to pass them into a function, we can just do a quick example over here. Like, let's say we had a function that took 3 inputs and it just returned like a plus b plus c or something like that, right? And we could say that we have an array called nums, and then we could actually call this function, we probably should have given it a name, sum it up. Let's call it that. And we could actually just call that. We could just say like console log of sum it up. And if we asked it to do this with like just nums as an input, it would be like, what are you talking about? I don't know how to do that. Like, it's going to put the full array here. Yeah, I forgot. JavaScript is very understanding. So even though we're asking for something that doesn't make sense, it's going to try to make sense of it. So basically, it takes the full array, all 3 of the elements, and then it concatenates the word undefined, and then it concatenates the word undefined to that. So not really what we're looking for, right? So basically, when we call it like this, sum it up of nums, we're basically passing in an array for the first element, nothing for the second element, and nothing for the third. Whereas if we do this, ... now we're passing in basically these 3 elements as the 3 arguments to this function. So I'm going to save that and run the code. And now we should see at the bottom, yeah, 12. It's actually adding up these numbers. So I just wanted to make sure that we have a good understanding of like how this spread operator stuff is working. I always like to think of these as basically just dissolving away the array brackets. That's pretty much it. Okay, so now you're dealing with the contents of it instead of the array itself. It's like opening up the package, like unwrapping a present. Okay, so we've got our merged list. Now, this was a way to do it, but there's actually another way we could get this merged list that I think would be a little bit smarter. So instead of messing around with merged list and split list, let's actually go all the way back to the beginning here and notice like the only difference here, like we basically want to be doing the same thing, whether it's a space, whether it's a backslash n, we just want to put all this stuff together. So basically what we could actually do is just immediately put all of these together by saying for input list, we're going to do, instead of entry.split and splitting along the new line characters, we're going to do a replace. Okay, so we're going to replace the new line character with a space character, and then we'll do a dot split on the space characters. So I think that's going to make it easier for us because we won't have to do a dot map on this. Like we'll be able to just take basically all this part out and just do the dot split after we do our replace. So let's well, actually, I'm not gonna mess around with these quite yet. I'm just gonna make a new one. We'll just say const new list. I'll just call it for now. We might change that name later, but it's gonna be input list dot map, and for each entry, we're going to be doing something different to it. So instead of, how'd that get minimized? Instead of this entry.split, first let's just do entry.replace. Okay, so replace is a nice built-in for strings. Basically, well, actually, yeah, as my IDE can tell you, that this is going to go through and it's going to replace a certain character in a string with whatever you tell it to replace it with. So basically, we could say like, yeah, I'm tempted to actually take a look at a simpler example here before we go ahead and do this full replace. So yeah, just like we did with the spread operator, let's go ahead and look at something simpler. So we'll just say const str is ABC, and we just want to console log str.replace, and we'll replace the A character with C, let's say. Okay, so we'll save that. And, oh yeah, I have a lot of scrolling to do. So I think we console log it. Yeah, there we go. CBC. Okay, very nice. Okay, yeah, so basically replace is just replacing that, that thing. Okay, so that's totally fine, but what if there was more than one? Because like, as we saw before, they're kind of actually, sorry, let me get rid of the other console log just so not as much information comes out. Yeah, as we saw in the other case, like there are entries that have multiple new lines, right? So in this case, we replaced the first A, but not the second one. So this is where there's actually a really, really nice, helpful feature here for the replace built in. We don't have to give it just a string, okay? Because it's looking at this and saying, yeah, I saw that, I saw that string in here and I replaced it just like you asked me to. It's like, okay, yeah, thanks a lot. What we want to say is not just a single A character, but all of them, right? So there's a way we can do that. We can use a regular expression and then use the, well, actually, let's just one step at a time, right? Let's make sure this works with the regular expression because we're using, yeah, a different data type, right? It's no longer a string, it's a regex. Okay, so it didn't really help, right? It only replaced one of these things. So let's put the global flag at the end, which means that it should now check all of these, and there we go. So it actually replaced them all. So that's good. I'm glad we did that. Now what we want to do is replace our new line characters with the, where were we? Sorry. Yeah, here it was, our new list. I had a bunch of new lines here before. Okay, great. So we want to replace basically /n with, and all of these, of course, with just a space. Okay, so we'll do that, and then we'll do a console log of new list. And I think that's the only thing we're console logging, so nice. Okay, good stuff. So we found all the new line characters, we replaced them with spaces, and I have to say, this is just so much nicer to look at already. I mean, not having all those extra breaks everywhere, it's I feel relieved. Okay, great. So we've got our new list, and this makes it much simpler because basically now we just do our entry, we do entry.replace. Now this thing, entry.replace, that's just a string. So we can just do our dot split on the space character on this thing. And now if we look at our new list, we're actually in just as good shape as we were down here, except I think a lot less painlessly. So we've already got them merged into a single array. We did all of that just by doing our new list thing over here. Okay. So I'll just comment. So replace new lines with spaces, then split on the spaces. Okay. Or I'll just say split into arrays. Great. Okay, nice. So new list, yeah, we could just call this like, you know what? Let's call it entry arrays. Okay, because it's the arrays representing the entries we have over here. And we don't need this merged list thing anymore. Okay, so we want to now convert the resulting array into a set. Each one of these things we want to convert into a set. So why a set? Yeah, I feel like I should sort of reveal why I'm suggesting that. So let's actually go back to the split screen view over here. Now keep in mind, at least for this part of the problem, we haven't looked at part 2 yet, but at least for this part of the problem, they're asking us just whether these properties exist. And that's it. They're not asking us like what the values of these things are. All they're asking us for are whether these values exist, and that's it. Okay, so basically with that in mind, we could sort of think about like what type of a data structure makes sense here. So let's just review our basic data structures. I sort of listed these out before. Now we've talked a lot about arrays. We've dealt with these a lot. We've done destructuring, all that kind of fun stuff. We've done some object stuff, and we're probably going to look at objects pretty soon. I mean, it seems like this data, it feels very objecty, right? Like we have the key and value pairs. And by the way, just to sort of define what I mean by that, when we're talking about an object, we're talking about something that has basically each thing has the name of the thing and then the thing itself. Okay, so you can think of these as kind of like a computer versus the word computer. Okay, so basically like the thing on the right is the thing itself. We call that the value, and the thing on the left is the name of that thing, the key that we're using to identify that thing. So for an object, keys are always strings. Okay, in an object, keys are strings. In an array, we don't really have keys, right? Normally, if we wanted to list things in an array, we would just have like the things themselves separated by commas. But there is an indexing on them. There is still like, technically they have keys. It's just that those keys are integer values, non-negative integers specifically. So 0, 1, 2. We're not going to have 1.5, we're not going to have -1, and we're not going to have pi. But basically the idea is we're going to have non-negative integer keys for an array. Okay. Now keep in mind, in both cases, the values can be whatever. It could be a string, it could be a number, it could be a Boolean, it could be a function. It's totally up to you. In some other languages, and indeed in some parts of JavaScript, that's not true. For example, we have something called a typed array, which is a lot more strict. We can't like change the size of it. We can't put like different types of data into it. It's we can even be specific about like the size of integer we want to put inside. And we would usually use those if we're trying to like really micromanage the efficiency of our code. We're probably not going to worry too much about that, but hey, you know, if anyone's interested, we can. The main thing I'm trying to say is that the values can be whatever, okay? You can put whatever kind of thing in for the values. The keys are the things that are a little more strict. So in an array, traditionally, the keys are integer values. In an object, the keys are strings. They have to be. Okay. And notice, like, it could be a string that looks a lot like an integer, but it always is going to be a string. Okay. Now, you might be wondering, well, what if I wanted to be something different? What if I want something where it's like, a function or an object is the key? And, okay, that's pretty wild. That's a pretty out there kind of idea, but I'm glad you asked, because there is such a data structure. It's called a map, capital M map, not to be confused with like an array.map. But basically it allows you to do just that. It's very much an ES6 thing. I don't know how well supported it is. And it's actually not the thing I want to talk about right now, but maybe later. The main thing is, at this point, you might also be wondering, what if we didn't have any keys at all? So they could be integers, they could be strings, maybe they could be something else like this map thing, but what if we didn't want them at all? What if we were like, yeah, undefined, please. I'd prefer null keys. Well, we do have something like that. Now, first of all, it's going to be basically, as you imagine, like if nothing has an index on it, it might be kind of hard to find, right? And so that is going to be one of the characteristics of this thing. Basically, it sort of looks like we have this amorphous blob containing these different kinds of values that are just sort of floating around there. There's no indexing. There's no order to this thing. However, maybe it's actually a bit inaccurate for me to say that this thing is just the values and not the keys, because it might actually be more accurate to say that this thing is just the keys and no values associated with them. Because basically the idea behind a set is we would use this when we want to really quickly be able to tell if something is in here, okay? So if we wanted to tell if an element was in an array, we would have to search through it. We wouldn't know the index of it. We'd have to say, oh, okay, well, check the thing at index 0. Is it that? No. Okay, check the thing at index 1. Is it that? No. Okay, check the thing at index 2. Is it that? No. Okay. And then it would search through until it finds it. So that's like a big O of n operation. Whereas if we knew the key of the thing, we'd just be like, hey, what's array at 2? Oh, it's true. Okay, got it. That's instant, right? So the nice thing about a set is it allows us to store values that can be looked up instantly, okay? We lose the ordering and indexing that we would get from an array, but we gain with that the ability to get these instant lookups. This might not seem like a big deal, right? You might think like, who cares? Like, there's not that big of a difference. Just, being able to grab something instantly versus just searching through an array. Like, it's not that big of a deal to search through an array. And I mean, what I'd say about that is that's true, but imagine the array was huge, and imagine that we were within like a loop or recursive function where we had to do these lookups like thousands of times a second. Now it makes a huge difference. Constant time would be a lot better than linear time. Okay, so with that in mind, returning to the problem description over here, since we just need to check if the keys are in there, I think a set is going to be a very appropriate data structure for us to use. So that's why when we were looking at our IDE, and I'm going to switch over to the full mode again, that's why we had this step where we said, let's convert the resulting arrays into sets. Okay, so for each one of these arrays here, I want to convert that to a set. Okay, so one more thing I guess I'm going to say is, originally I was thinking it would make more sense to sort of stack these on and make like new variables for each one. Like, okay, here's one where we convert two arrays. Here's one where, but I think I'm just going to continue modifying it directly in here. So the first thing is that we're doing our dot replace with our new lines. We're doing our dot split so that each one of these things is like an independent string. And then what I want to do on this is basically dot map these. Yeah. So I'm going to do a dot map on each one of these arrays. The reason I'm doing it in here as opposed to like making a new variable is because then I would basically just have to say, like, for each one, do entry dot map. Right? So we might as well just build it into this. Okay, so what is the dot map that we want to do? So we have a pair, right? We have a key value pair. In fact, we could just call it that. Let's call it key value pair. That would be fun. Really good to have nice descriptive variable names. So there we go, key value pair. What do we want to do with this key value pair? Well, we want to say key value pair dot split on the colon character, right? Yeah. That's right. So we're going to do that dot split, and we're just going to take the 0th element. And that's it. Okay. So, yeah, I think that's all there is to it. So basically we've got this thing. We've got a dot split. We're just taking the 0th element on each one of those. So basically, dot split is just going to say, like, we're going to look at this character. Whatever's to the left of it is going to be element 0. Whatever's to the right of it is going to be element 1. Each of those are going to be their own separate strings. So yeah, actually, let's take a look at both of these. If I didn't have the at 0, then both of those would be present, right? We have the key and the value. I'm saying at 0 because I don't really care about the value right now, right? All we need to know is whether it's, all we need to know is the keys, is I guess what I'm trying to say. Okay, and we want this to be a set, right? So all of this, if you think about it, like this whole thing right here, what is it? It's an array. Okay, so let's convert that array into a set. How do we do that? It's actually pretty straightforward. We just say new set and we pass in that array as the value. So we could just do something like this and, you know, split this up. Maybe we want to say like, well, actually, wait, hold on a sec. Let's see if this works. Maybe that's, yeah, nice. I was afraid this was just going to say set and not tell us what the entries were. But yeah, this is perfect. Just what we're looking for. There's another property of a set that basically gets rid of duplicate entries, but I don't think we would have duplicate entries here anyway. And I also don't think it would be an issue in terms of the type of validation that we're trying to do here. So I don't think we really need to worry about that. Now I'm just going to off screen here, grab the list of properties that we need to check for. And that's from, that's from the task description. So basically right over here, we need to check for all of these. So I'm just going to make a new variable. There we go, props. And it's just going to be all of these things over here. And you might look at that and say, hey, wait a second. I think you forgot CID at the end. And it does say in the task description, CID is optional. So yeah, very sneaky. Anyway, okay, so we want to continue with this. We've got our props over here. We've got the set for each one of these things. And basically, here's what I want to do. So entry arrays, I'm going to do a dot filter. Wait, no, I'll do a dot map for now because that'll be fun. So for each one of these things, I'm going to say entry or prop set or key set. Yeah, let's call it key set. Just because it does consist of just the keys from those key value pairs, and it is a set. So yeah, we're being nice and descriptive about that. So this is going to get mapped to what? Well, we're going to use another array built in here, and I'm so excited about it. So this is our list of props. It's the properties. I guess I could call this keys, actually. Maybe that's even better. Let's call this keys. So, or hey, this is the best one yet. Required keys. That's nice. Yeah, nice and descriptive. Someone would know what we're talking about without even knowing programming. Okay, great. So required keys. Well, they would kind of know what we're talking about. They'd be like, what's a key? Anyway, so required keys is basically this list over here. And we want to say, do we have all of these? Are all of these inside of our key set here? So we could say something like this. We could say like, you know, required keys dot reduce, I guess we could, if we really want to do this functionally, we could do this and we could say, I'll just say bool for Boolean and key over here. Yeah, and so basically for the reduce, we could just say for the Boolean, let's start it out as true. And we'll say Boolean, whatever it was, right? And we'll say, the key set dot has key. All right, makes sense? Maybe not, but this is like a reduce like we've done before. So it's a function that's going to run through and kind of like a snowball, it's going to roll up each of these individual entries into one thing. Now, sometimes we do this for like adding up numbers. Sometimes we do this for combining multiple arrays like we saw before with the spread operator. Sometimes we do this for, stuff like Boolean logic, right? So this is a true or false value, and we're saying we want this and this thing. So the idea is it's like we're saying, is this thing in the set, and is this thing in the set, and is this thing in the set, and is this thing, etc. Okay, so basically the idea is we're checking to see if all of those are in the set. So what we should get from this is some Boolean values. We should get like true false or something like that. I'm not sure exactly which ones are valid here. Yeah, I think there's supposed to be 2 valid passports. So let's go ahead and run this thing. Yeah, true, false, true, false. So 2 valid, 2 invalid. Now the only problem with this is this like dot reduce thing. It's kind of awkward. Let's be real. It's not really nice looking at this. And we're all about being semantic, right? We're all about making the code obvious so that any reader should be able to look at it and be like, oh, I know what you mean. As opposed to this, which I'm kind of feeling like it might not be that clear at first glance. So here's what we're going to do instead. We have another really useful built-in for arrays in JavaScript. So required keys is an array. We can say required keys dot every. Okay, and then we'll just do the same function. So for each key, we'll say, does the key set have that key? By the way, dot has is a wonderful built-in, one of my favorites of all time, and it's one of the reasons I so much enjoy using the set data structure, because we don't have to do like a dot includes, for example, which would be, as we spoke about before, a linear time lookup. The dot has not only is it a shorter word and so much more efficient for things like code golfing, but also it's a much more efficiently performing built-in. So it's a nice thing to use. Okay, nice. And because it's a shorter word, and because the dot every has allowed us to condense this, we now have this whole thing on one line. So that's nice. Okay, so convert the resulting array into a set. Yeah, we kind of are doing all of this in one now, I think. And then check if all the required fields are in the set. So that's part of what we're doing down here, right? We're doing this dot everything. Now, we did a dot map in this case, but we could just as easily do a dot filter, because keep in mind, dot filter is like dot map, except it's different in terms of the output it produces. So both of them take a callback function, and that callback function is going to run on every element of the array. In terms of what it does with the result, a map will just return the result and replace the current entry with the result of running that callback function on the entry. What filter does is a little bit different. It also runs the function, but then it gets the result and it says, is this true or is this false? If it's true, it'll keep the thing in the list. If it's false, it'll remove the thing from the list. Okay, so if we were to do our dot filter, instead of getting these true and false values, we should get the same things that we had in the original array. The only difference is that they're not all going to be there. The ones that would return false should be kicked out. So basically this, the indices 0 and 2 are the ones that should remain here. So let's try that out. Yeah, there we go. I think that looks right. So nice stuff. Now, of course, what we're actually interested in this case is not the actual correct passwords or passports. We don't need to know which ones of them, I don't think that's grammatically correct, but we don't need to know which ones of them are actually valid. What we need to know is how many of them are valid. So at the end of this filter, I'm just going to throw on a dot length. Okay, and in fact, let's go ahead and just remove that from the console log. Uh-oh, you never want to see that. An extra parenthesis left behind. How many valid is going to be assigned the value of this thing? And I'm going to remember that. I was just about to say, I'm going to remember that needs a, what do you call it? A parenthesis at the end. Yeah, actually, it looks like the parenthesis belongs here. So the dot length was in the wrong spot. Well, good thing we rearranged that. We might have had an error otherwise. Okay, so we're just going to console log how many valid. So let's go ahead and do that. And yeah, 2. 2 seems to be the right answer. I mean, that is how many were valid here. So, okay, that's good stuff. Nice. All right, so do we have all the information we're looking for now? Well, I think so, at least for part 1. So we could go back to the problem description and we can give this a try. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to grab the first 2 lines of our fetch code over here, and I'm going to paste them into our browser console. Okay, so that should give us our response and response text. So I don't need response text. That's just sort of the dummy data we were using. I shouldn't call it that. The example data we were using. It wasn't dumb at all. It was actually really smart. Okay, so now we should have this how many valid value. And if we just check out what that is, that should be our answer. 206. Okay, I wonder how many there were in the beginning. I guess we could tell just by doing input list.length, which, whoops, there we go. Input list.length. So actually a lot of them were valid. Holy, 206 out of 257. That's quite a few. Well, either that or we made a mistake, which is fully possible. So let's find out what happened. We did not make a mistake, surprisingly enough. Okay, not bad. Well done, everyone. Congratulations on completing part 1. Let's go ahead and continue to part 2. And now we find out, you know what? Maybe it would have been a good idea to actually keep all that all that data instead of just taking the 0th part over here. Because it turns out not only do we need both parts, but we need to do a ton of stuff to both parts. So basically the idea is that we're given all of these requirements for each of the fields that need to be there. So we don't need to just check that they're there. We need to then on top of that do some other stuff. So actually, you know what? Let's go ahead and make a function for this just to check if the information is complete, because that's basically what we did over here, right? We've got our required keys dot every. So I think, well, actually, I shouldn't say that because we're probably going to change this, right? We're probably not going to use a set anymore. If we recall, like a set was something that was super useful when we only needed to know one of the pieces of information. So I kind of oscillated between calling these the keys and values. I think they're more like keys because we can directly access them, but the point is moot at this point. We're not going to be using a set anymore. We're going to use an object because we need both the keys and the values. We need the keys to be able to tell that they're there and also to be able to tell what the corresponding value is so that we know what rule we need to actually follow in order to validate the value. Okay, so this is the part that could maybe seem a little bit tedious, but I actually think it's going to be a lot of fun. So we'll probably look back at this in just a second to get the actual list of requirements. But before we do that, let's just go back to our full view because I want to talk about how we can get this into an object instead of a set. Okay. I should have had the foresight. I'm sorry I led us down this path. Who could have known that part 2 would hold such a surprise? Anyway, okay, basically I don't want this to be a set. Let's start with that. Okay, so we're going to get rid of the setness of this thing, and instead we're just going to have this. So key value pair dot split. I'm just going to save this, and I guess we'll get rid of this how many valid thing for now. Yeah, let's go ahead and get rid of that. And we'll use entry arrays as the thing we're going to console log. Okay, yeah, so this is bringing us back to the point where it was basically an array that had the keys and the values, but not exactly in the form that we want them in, right? So like, it's okay, but it's not really ideal. So what we want is basically something that's like, taking this as an example, we want something that's like this, but it's an object. These parts over here are going to be the keys of the object, and then these parts over here are going to be the values of the object. That's what we want. So let's try to find a way to do that. Now, we talked a bit about reduce before, and as it turns out, that's what I'm going to try to use here. Now, I will say, I haven't actually tried this yet, but I think it's going to be nice. Now, another thing I guess I'll mention, and I'm looking forward to hearing opinions about this. So we've sort of talked about this strategy we've been following, right? Where we try to make our code work, and then we try to make it efficient, and then we try to make it beautiful. And as part of doing that, we try to make sure that it's all functional. I'm noticing a bit of a shift in the way that we're approaching some of these problems. For example, in this case, we didn't really start by doing this in a non-functional way. So as long as you, dear viewer, are comfortable with this, I think we may sort of keep that up in the sense of just kind of going directly into a functional way of doing this. If you'd prefer to see the non-functional way first, the more sort of traditional object and loop kind of strategy, we can do that. That's totally fine. For now, we're just going to go right into this object strategy. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use reduce. So first of all, before I even specify anything about the callback function, I'm going to start with an initial value of empty object, okay? And then basically what we're going to do is as we go through this object, as we go through the array, we're going to look at this and we're going to say, okay, here's what I'd like to do. I would like to make a new object consisting of the entries of the existing object, which is initially empty, and then this new key and new value. That's what we want to do. Okay, so let's try to do that. Like I was saying before, I haven't actually tried this yet. I don't know if it's going to work. I hope it does, but we'll see. So basically this, should I just call it like obj? Yeah, I'll just call it obj for now. And then the second part is like the actual current entry. So I'm actually going to take advantage of destructuring here and just call this key and value. Okay, so now what we can do as an output for this is basically create a new object, and it's going to have all of the entries of object as well as this new entry, which is going to be this key and value. Now, in terms of how we do that, I've seen a few ways that this can be done. The problem is if we just do this, like key value, my suspicion is that these objects are only going to have one thing in them. Like for example, this one, I think the way this would look is basically just an object that literally says key as the key and then has 179 centimeters as the value. I think that's what's going to happen here. Did that save? I don't know if that worked. I might have an error or something like that. Yeah, okay. This is no good. Oh, okay. Yes. All right. This is important. This is super, super, super important. So when we're talking about arrow functions in JavaScript, this is the way they work, okay? Arrow function has an input in here and then an output over here by default. Okay. Now, if we wanted to do some other stuff inside the function and we didn't just want to go ahead and return the output, we would, do some stuff. And then at the end, we would say return output. Okay. So basically what I'm trying to say is if we have these curly brackets, if we have the braces around the thing that we're returning, it's going to assume that we mean, oh, actually, I don't just want to return one thing. I want to bust this open into a much larger function. We're trying to do this the other way. We're actually trying to say, no, just give us the output. It just so happens that that output is an object, and so it has curly braces around it. So basically, keep in mind, this is the same as this. So we can be explicit about this by putting parentheses around our object. And now it's like, oh, okay, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Why didn't you say that? Okay, so now let's try running this thing. And it's just like I said, it has key for each of these things, and it's just the last thing that it saw. So it's literally using the word key. It doesn't recognize that I'm asking for the variable key. Or the value of that variable. So the way I'm going to do this is, originally I thought this was actually destructuring. I no longer believe this is destructuring. I think this is actually typecasting. I think what we're doing here is we're saying, I want key, and now I'm going to put it in an array, and basically JavaScript is going to say, oh, you actually can't have an array as the key of an object, like we talked about before. They have to be strings, right? So JavaScript is going to be like, oh, it's okay. I'll convert it for you. Don't get up. You don't have to worry. I'll convert it for you. I'll make it the value you want it to be. Okay, so let's see if that works. And it does. Okay, nice. So we've got our keys, we've got our values, we've got nice objects, a single object for each one of these things. Hey, not bad, not bad. So I'm going to call this like entry objects. And we actually could have called it like entry sets before, I think. But anyway, who cares? So basically, let's save that. I think I already ran it. So yeah, not sure why we checked that again, but it's okay. It's okay. We now have the list of all of our entries in the form of objects. So you remember at the beginning of this task, we said that it was going to be a lot to do with data manipulation and data validation. So the manipulation part of this is complete. Okay, we've got our data in exactly the form that we want it. So might as well check what we're supposed to actually do with this stuff, right? So there are, broadly speaking, there are two types of things we need to do. So for these first three, we need to make sure that a number is within a certain range. And a nice thing to kind of look out for is, like, you notice how it says 4 digits? I think in some ways that's kind of a red herring, you know, just to see if any users are going to be like, oh yeah, better get the length of this thing. But it's kind of implied that this is going to be 4 digits if it's between these numbers, don't you think? Like these are 4 digit. I can't think of any 4-digit numbers that are between 1920 and 2002. Anyway, sorry, I can't think of any non-4-digit numbers that are between those. Hopefully I said that right the first time. Oh well. So, okay, basically all I'm trying to say is, since we need to do this multiple times, we might want to be writing a function about it. We've talked a little bit about programmer instincts before. That's another one of those programmer instincts in terms of like, when should you write a function to do this thing? It's if you have to do that thing more than once. Okay, so height, I think this one's going to be a bit of a wild card because you'll notice it has this conditional in it. And I don't know if I'm all that comfortable with it. We haven't really, we don't see a conditional in any of these other ones. And also, like, what we found before is, like, if statements are kind of something that aren't really considered part of the functional programming paradigm. So we might not want to mess around with too many ifs. Anyway, we'll talk about how we can do that. It sort of has components of both, I would say. You know how I was saying there are basically 2 main types here. These 3 are all of the other type, I think, or actually not even. Like this one over here is very much like, I think, regular expressions for this, right? Because it's matching a certain pattern. It's got a hashtag symbol, not to be confused with a number, right? They're saying literally a hashtag symbol, and that's why it was considerate that they put that in an inline code block. But anyway, so a hashtag symbol followed by exactly 6 characters that are either 0 through 9 or A through F. So it's like a hex, right? It's a color, it's a hair color, makes sense. For the eye color, we're looking for something that's just, you know, something among a list of things. Hey, that sounds like a pretty good application of a set data structure. We might want to use set for this thing. Looking forward to that. But anyway, passport ID, 9-digit number, include leading zeros. Again, feels kind of like this is matching a pattern, especially the including leading zeros part here. That makes it feel more regular expression flavored than like number flavored, right? Because if we're comparing a number, we would always disregard leading zeros. So this is maybe a bit of a hint that we're looking at this in terms of a string. We're probably going to use a regular expression. This one we're ignoring. We don't have to worry about it. So we won't. Okay, so basically what we're finding is that, like, there are a few that like should or at least could be done with regular expressions. There are some that are just going to be like, check if the number's in range. And then there's one that's kind of combining both of those. So we'll talk about how we can best deal with that. But I do have to say, when I first looked at this problem, I kind of thought like, oh, this looks boring, especially because of all this like validation stuff. But the more I thought about it and the more I explored it, it actually did turn out to be really interesting, especially this this height one. So let's actually dive in and see how we can deal with these things. So I just don't really want to maintain this split screen because I want to get the IDE back on screen. So basically, you know, feel free to open up that Advent of Code like window, put in another tab or something like that if you need to check these values. I'm basically just going to not have them on screen for while we're talking about them. Although I guess like we could maybe put those into comments or something like that. Yeah, maybe that's a good idea. Let's put them into comments. Okay, because now we have the data the way we want it, like we were saying before, right? So, how do we select multiple lines? I think it's Shift-Alt-I. Yeah, okay, let's just go home and we'll make these all into comments. And we'll put a space just to sort of represent it's a comment of something that we, it's not like code that was commented out. It's a comment that's meant to be a comment. Okay, cool. So basically, yeah, we need to verify all these things. So I think the way I want to do it is basically this. We've got our entry objects, right? This is like a list that contains many objects. So I want to do basically this. So for each object, we want to do the following things. Check if all the required fields are there. And then check if the values are valid. Okay, so we can think of this as checking for completeness and then checking for validity. Okay, so because we need to check both of these things, and because we need to do this for each object, I want to write a function that's just going to do this for one object, and then we can do like, a dot filter on our entry objects array and run that function on each one of those. Okay, so I'm actually going to write separate functions for the completeness check and the validity check, and then we'll combine those within the filter in actually a really clever way that I'm excited to show you. Okay, so check if all the required fields are there. Let's start with that. So basically, we could call this completeness check. Completeness check. Yeah, cool. And basically, it's going to take an object. And what it's going to return is basically just something that checks if all the required keys were there, right? So we're going to say, take all your required keys and just check to see if they're actually in there. So we're going to say required keys dot every, and then we can say key, and we want to check, does our object have that key, right? So object dot has key. Now wait a minute, dot has, that was a totally fine built-in to be using when we're dealing with a set. This is no longer a set. This is an object. So we can't use .has, unfortunately. What we can do is something very similar. We can say key in object. Okay, so this is actually an older syntax, I believe, and it's just here to check if this is one of the keys in this object. I think we could probably also just say object at key. Like, why not, right? Because if it doesn't exist, like if that key is not one of the keys of this object, then this thing will just be undefined. So, no problem there, right? Unfortunately, there is a little bit of a problem. So for example, if their PID turned out to just be like 00000000000, then that might get typecast to false, right? So we're like, keep in mind, when we're looking at .every, it's a lot like .filter. Like, this thing needs to be a Boolean. So if we give it something that's not a Boolean, it's going to convert it into a Boolean. So it's going to look at like something like this 7607, and it's going to be like, yeah, that looks like true to me. This looks like true. This string looks like true. Like, it only understands true or false, right? So if you give it something that's either like empty string or like a 0 or like an empty array, it'll be like, oh, actually that looks like false. So it might mess up the values a little bit. It might mess up our check if we don't do it like this. So key in object. So that's our completeness check. Now, I guess what we could do is, just to sort of make sure this is working the way we want, we could say entry objects dot filter, and then we'll just say completeness check. Okay, because it's already a function that takes an object and returns something. So what we, I think, hope to see now is basically like a true false kind of thing. So let's try that. And what just happened? So, oh yeah, dot filter, sorry. I was thinking dot map, but yeah, okay, great. So it's basically keeping the ones that are valid. And so that's why there are only 2 entries in here. Yeah, because we filtered it. Great. So we're done with our completeness check. That's great. Now let's do our validity check. And this is also going to take an object, but it's going to be a lot longer. So I'm going to open up the braces for this one because we expect that this isn't going to be a thing where we're simply going to just return one thing, right? And in fact, we sort of want every one of these things in here, right? We want like all these properties. So basically, I'm just going to grab these from off screen and just paste them in. So for our object, instead of just object, I'm going to destructure it. Okay, so I'm going to say I'm going to want all of these properties. Now, assuming we've already done the completeness check, by the time we get to the validity check, we can assume that all these properties are in there, so we don't need to worry about it being like, oh, object at BYR is undefined, or anything like that. Okay, so basically my plan is we're just going to go through these individually, and we're just going to check them according to the specification, according to the requirements that we have listed above. Let's just delete that space. Okay, so for the first three, we just need to check if they're within a certain range. Okay, so let's actually write a function for that before we go any further. So I'll just say const check in range. Yeah, check in range. And we'll just say num string actually, and then min and max. Why num string? Well, something you might notice is like IYR, EYR, like these things that we need, they are strings right now. So I don't actually really want to go through the process of converting them to numbers. At least I don't want to do that before calling this function. So when we call this function, I want to be able to just give it the string value of it and then have the function convert it to a number, which we do need to do, because if we don't do that, then the comparisons we're about to make are going to be very different. They're not going to work properly. So we want to know if this number is within this inclusive range of min and max. Okay. Yeah, so like if we were to do these less than or equal to's and stuff like that, with num still being a string, that would actually have unexpected results, I think. We probably would not be too happy with what that ends up looking like in the end. Okay, so basically what we want to do is, I'll just say BYR check. I'm just going to do basically for each of these little codes here, I'm just going to do that same thing and then the word check after. So we'll say check in range, and the number, or the num string, I should say, is BYR. It needs to be between 1920 and 2002. So let's do that, 1920, 2002. Okay. And then we'll move on to the next one, which is IYR check. That's also going to be a check in range. And I'm realizing that copying the previous line would have been a very efficient thing to do here. Okay, so where was it? 2010 and 2020. Nice. And then EYR check. I think that one's really similar. 2010 and 2030 is the number I recall. 2030. Yeah, there we go. Okay, cool. Expiration year. So I think we may be done the ones that had like a check in range component. So we'll move on from here. I kind of want to save height for last. So yeah, and let's remember that these two parts go with the height. So yeah, let's do like the hair color, eye color, and PID. And then we'll talk about how we can do the other part. Okay, so what's next then? If we're saving HGT for later, I'll just leave a space for it and we'll say HCL check. This one was hair color. So I think what we'll do is a regular expression. So we'll do something like, well, first of all, we'll put in the forward slashes, and then we know it needs to have, actually before we go any further, just in case there's like some extra junk in there, let's just put like a start and end character here. So in case you're unfamiliar with this is basically like the start of the line character and then the end of the line character. When we feed in these values, like for example, HCL, it's a value, right? Like it's yeah, this right here. So it shouldn't have any extra junk. Like it shouldn't have like any spaces or extra characters around it. So just to be sure of that, we're putting in these characters, the start and end characters. That's a good thing to keep in mind when we're doing regular expressions. I guess it's a good general thing to keep in mind, but especially in regular expressions, we certainly want to consider the edge cases as much as possible. We want to be as specific as we can about what we're looking for. So we know we need a hashtag character. Now, if we're concerned about this being some sort of special character, we could always escape it like that. I don't think we need to worry about that, but anyway, I guess we'll find out. We can always go to regex 101 and ask them what they think. But anyway, as for now, we're just going to do this. And then we'll say we want 0 to 9 or A through F. We want a character like that. And in fact, we want more than one. We want 6 of them. right? So in the past, we've seen stuff where we're like, just put a plus and then it's like 1 or more. Or we could put like an asterisk and then it's like 0 or more. Or what we could do is, basically just use these braces and say, I want exactly this many actually. Okay, so HCL check is going to be this regular expression dot test HCL. Okay, is it a valid hair color? We'll use this regular expression to check that. Okay. So then similarly, there's another one that was like a regular expression. It was the PID check, I think. Yeah, we needed to check if this one is a 9-digit number, including leading zeros. I should have started with this one because that's actually quite a bit simpler than the one we just did. But anyway, that's fine. So it needs to be a digit, and there needs to be 9 of them. So we could also just do like a 0 through 9. That would work as well. This is just an alias for that. By the way, the square brackets over here indicate that like we can have one of anything within this list. That's what it's going to match. Okay, so if you need to go through like multiple options, these square brackets can be a good choice for that type of thing. Okay, so we skipped one. Yeah, ECL, const ECL check is assign the value of I'll just say true for now, just so that, I don't leave it hanging. But I'm thinking for ECL, this one, we could use a regular expression for this. We could use just like a set for this. I'm not really sure which would be better. We've used a set before, so why don't we actually just use a regular expression for this, just to sort of stay on theme here. So basically for a regular expression, we've got the start, we've got the end, and then I'm just going to put in like, okay, so basically we want a list of multiple options, right? This is a way we can do that when there's just a single character at a time that we're talking about. But if we're talking about like a larger kind of thing, we're going to do something a little bit different. So we're just going to use this, they call it the pipe character. It's basically like what we would use for a Boolean OR, except we would normally use 2 of them. So yeah, we've got something like this. And then for this thing, basically, this actually is a capturing group. I put this here just so that it would know that I mean like the start of the string and then one of these things, and then the end of the string, as opposed to if we didn't include this, then it would be like, okay, either it's going to be the start of the string and then A and B, or it's going to be BLU or BRN, etc., or it's going to be OTH and then the end of the string, right? That's not what we want. We want basically start of the string, some 3-letter thing, and then the end of the string. Okay, so the problem with this is it's a capturing group, and we don't need this to capture. So I like to be very, very specific, as I was saying, in terms of regular expressions. So we're going to make this a non-capturing group. So the way we do that is we just say question mark, colon. And the way I remember this and the order of this is that this looks like a very strange kind of emoticon, the way we used to make them on the early internet. So I just remembered that, the smile's like on one end and the eyes are on the other end. Like the question mark makes for a pretty weird shaped nose, but yeah, anyway, that's how I remember it. I'm sure you'll have a better trick that you can use. But the main thing is we put this in here when we don't need for this to be a capturing group. So in the second, in the day 2 problem, we looked at how we can use capturing groups in regular expressions. That's when we want to actually capture the thing. But in this case, we didn't want to capture the thing. So we're just going to write it like this. Oh, I forgot my .test. .test, PID. So .test is basically JavaScript built in for regular expressions, and it's used to test, to see if this pattern or if this string matches this pattern. So it's just something that's going to return a true or a false. So we've got 6 out of the 7 things that we need here to validate. And in terms of our validity check here, like the reason I'm putting each of these in separate things is because we might want to know that, right? We might want to actually be able to test this out. And if we were unsure about this, like if we were getting some erroneous results, and hey, maybe we will. So we may have more of an opportunity to talk about this, but we could just sort of like console log each of these things. And then basically, or like we could return an object with each of these things in it and then sort of reduce that. Like, yeah, we have some options in terms of how we do that. But anyway, okay, for now, I think what I want to do is move on to our height check. So we need to do a few things here. First, we know that there's going to be a number, and then there's going to be some kind of unit, like centimeters or inches. And then depending on what the unit is, we need to check if it's within these numerical ranges. So yeah, it's a bit of a combination of both, which I guess it's appropriate that it's sort of right in the middle here. So we have 3 check-in ranges, we have 3 regular expressions, and now right in the center, we're going to have a combination of both. So I'm going to start this in a way that is maybe going to be not the most, I was going to say I'm going to start this in a way that might be not the most functional, but I think it's possible to do it this way. So yeah, okay, we could do something like this. So I'm going to say HGT pattern. Okay, so this is going to represent a regular expression. And just like these other ones, I'm going to make sure that we start with the start and end of the string. And then this is going to have some number. Okay, and it could be multiple digits, so we're going to put in the plus. And then it's either going to have centimeters or inches. Okay, so that's our HGT pattern. And now basically I'm going to say const HGT check is going to be assigned the value of HGT pattern.test HGT. And we're going to use this as a ternary, basically. So it's either something or it's going to be false. And actually, hold on. Let's just do it this way. I don't want to get too deep into these ternaries quite yet. Let's just actually just say something like this. So let HGT check be assigned the value of false, and then we'll set it to true if it turns out that it should be true. How's that? Okay. So we'll say if HGT check, if HGT pattern dot test. There we go. Okay, so if it's the right kind of format, you might be looking at this and thinking, well, hey, it's a little weird that you did this like non-capturing group down here, and then in this case you did capture it. What's that all about? Well, there is a good reason for that, and it's because I actually do want to capture these things now, and I'm going to call them my num and unit. We're going to do a destructuring here. So if you're unfamiliar with what I'm doing with this destructuring, basically the idea is that this thing, HGT.match, HGPat, this is going to return an array. And in that array, basically the 0th element is going to be the full match, the full HGT thing that it matches. So it'll be like 179 centimeters, okay? And then the num will be the first capture group. So the numerical parts of the 179. And then the unit will be the second capture group. So the unit part, so the CM part in this case. All right, so that's how we're going to get our values. And then we just need to check. So first of all, I'm just going to say integer number is just going to be parse int of num. I could have also been more consistent and just called it num string up here. Yeah, maybe let's do that just because that's what we called it in the other part. Like, might as well just adhere to one standard if we can. So we'll call this num and we'll call that num string. Okay, great. And then what we want to return is basically, this is going to be kind of big. So I'm going to say here, we'll start with the metric case or the imperial case. Okay, but it's just going to be a big Boolean that we're going to return here. So I'm going to say either the unit is equal to centimeters and check in range, I think we called it, yeah. Check in range. Oh yeah, maybe we don't actually need to do this conversion over here because we did that. So num string. Check in range, num string. What were the values for this? I guess I have them above. So 150 and 193. Okay. Great. Or basically the same thing, but a little bit different. So I'll copy this and we'll paste it in here and we'll say, or it's the imperial measurements, and we can go from 59 to 73. That's what my memory is telling me it was. 76. Okay. There we go. Okay, great. So return. Wait a sec. I don't want return. I want to say HGT check is assigned the value of this. Okay, that's what we're talking about. Yeah, so basically what I'm saying here is it's false by default. If it turns out that it matches the pattern, then we're going to check to see if it's actually valid. But if it doesn't match the pattern, we're just going to keep it false. Okay, so at this point, we basically should have all our checks done. This middle one is very, very awkward. It's looking at it is making me want to puke. But anyway, what we want to do here is basically to return all of these things. So BYR check and IYR check and all of these things. Okay, so we're just going to bundle them all up and make sure that they're all correct. This is going to take a while to type out. So in the meantime, I guess I just wanted to say, hey, have you heard about the Advent of Code subreddit? It turns out there's a subreddit for these challenges, and it's really, really cool. A lot of people have been posting some really whimsical and unique solutions to these challenges, which is always so much fun to see. I definitely recommend especially checking out the day 3 challenges. Lots of people made some cool little skiers and tobogganers and just really neat little visualizations. So you can have a lot of fun on that subreddit. Okay, so at this point, we've got our completeness check, we've got our validity check, but you know, well, okay, hold on. First thing I want to say is this. Let's say const results. Let's start with that, okay? And let's actually make it an object. So right after I typed all of this out, yeah, we're going to modify it. So we're going to make it an object, and we're going to do this. So you might think, hey, what are you doing? That's a little weird. Aren't these things supposed to have keys and values? It looks like you're only giving them one of the two. And yeah, that's true. So, oh man. Yeah, okay, I guess that's the way it wanted to show them. But anyway, so we've got all these things over here. We could do like a console log, for example, just to sort of see like which ones are passing, which ones are failing. And actually that might be a lot of fun. So here's what we'll do, all right? We're gonna do an entry objects.filter. Actually, you know what? We're gonna do, yeah, .filter. .filter sounds fine. Okay, so, and then not just completeness check we're gonna be doing now. It's gonna be for each entry, we're going to do the completeness check. And then if it passes that, we're going to do the validity check, okay? So we could say like, oh, do this, and then if true, then do the other thing. Yeah, we could do it that way. Or we could actually just use a quick little Boolean operator. So the thing about Booleans is like, you know, for true, so for and to be true, these both need to be true, right? True and true makes true. If it's true and false, now it's just going to be false. And if it's false and false, it's definitely going to be false. And if it's true and false, it's still going to be false. Which means if the first one's false, we don't need to bother checking the second one. Excuse me. If the first one's false, we don't need to bother checking the second one. We know the result is going to be false. And so JavaScript is smart about that. You might even say it's lazy about that. So basically the idea is it's going to check this thing. If this thing turns out to not be true, it's not going to bother with the second part, which is convenient for us because there are lots of times where we can use a Boolean operator like this when really all we're trying to do is like say, okay, check this. And then if it's true, then check this, you know, run this function. And then if that works, run this function. But in this case, we're not just trying to do that. We actually are trying to combine both of these things. We're trying to say, yeah, we want to know the ones that have a completeness check, right? That are complete and that are valid. Like it wouldn't be enough to just be valid. It needs to be both. Okay, so I'm going to save that. We're going to console log this. Validity check is returning this. Now, hopefully we basically just get the same thing in the console that we've been seeing all along. Yeah, 2 entries. It's what we're looking for. So now here's what we're going to do. In terms of results here, there's a reason I have this. So instead of just returning the results, let's just do a little console log of the results. Okay, so it's possible that one of these, yeah, okay, there we go. So there's our results. Looks like all of them were true here. And it looks like all of them were true here. Now, unfortunately, we don't have any examples where the information is complete but invalid, but we could easily, you know, do that. Like, we can modify one of these things. I think this was one of the valid entries, so we could just do a simple modification. Let's just do that. Or actually, here, let's go for the toughest one, height, right? So let's make the height 149. That should just be right out of the range there. So if we save that, something you might notice, you might be thinking, hey, that's a little weird. Like, we console logged these results, but we only see 2 out of 4 entries. Shouldn't we have seen all of those, even though we're not seeing all of them in the filtered out list? And the answer is no, because remember, those 2 failed the completeness check. So they didn't make it to the validity check. It didn't even bother with those. So now the difference is we should see still 2 of these results, but one of them is going to have a false for HDT check, and we should only see 1 of them in the final array after the invalid one is filtered out. There we go. There's the false we were expecting, and 1 of them has been filtered out. Okay, beautiful. So I think this is really nice. I'm very much enjoying it. There's one thing about it. We don't need to change that back. We're not going to be using that data in the end, so that's fine. Okay. There are actually a couple things I want to talk about. So the first thing is I love these. They're nice. These down here, beautiful. This is making me uncomfortable. You know, the fact that we have this like let in here, excuse me, you want to reassign a value? I'm sorry. I thought we were using functional JavaScript, so I wasn't planning on reassigning a value. We should probably try to find a functional way to do this. And then we can move on from there. But basically, let's go back to our split screen. I want to talk about a functional way we can do that validation. And there might be a much smarter way than what I'm about to do, but I think I'm just going to put it directly into a regular expression. Okay, so basically, let's go over here to our regex 101, and we've got some test data in here already. I put in some test strings. We could say like, digit plus, right? Just find all the ones that are digits. So we'll probably have something like that. But what we know we're going to have is the start of the string and the end of the string. So we'll start with that. And then basically what I want to say is that in between the start and the end, we're basically going to have just 2 possibilities. Okay, so it could be the first kind of thing, or it could be the second kind of thing. The first kind of thing is something that ends with inches. The second kind of thing is something that ends with centimeters. And now you'll notice it's matching the ones that it's not supposed to match, but we'll fix that up in just a sec, okay? So basically, we have a few things that we need to do. The first thing is we need to consider what kinds of things can we have in here. So like for the inches part of this, what kinds of numbers could we have? It could be 59. So we're just going to put that in straight up. It happens to be a number where we don't need to consider like, oh, maybe the first digit is 5 and the second is 8 or 9. No, it's just 59. Okay. Or it could be 60, 61, 62, 62, like it could be 60 something, right? So we'll say a 6 followed by a 0 to 9. Now you'll notice like we're looking at this very literally like strings, right? And already we're seeing some of these are sort of starting to pass. So this isn't necessarily the most comfortable way to do this type of validation. I definitely like the sort of like check in range function that we came up with earlier. Yeah, this is good because this is sort of showing us like even the ones that are matching morphologically to the 2 digits and then inches, it is checking to see if they're the right values. We find that 58's too low, 81's too high. So like, yeah, this seems to be working. And it seems that we've covered all the cases here for inches. So now let's talk about the centimeters cases. So these can go from 150 to 193. 150 to 193. Okay, so basically 150. Let's consider that first of all. So 1 and then 5, right? And then like a 0 to 9. But then it could also be like 160 to 169, or it could also be like 170 to 179. It could be 180 to 189. So like this second digit could be quite a few things. It could be 5 to 8. And then we also need to consider the case, because this basically gets us all the way from 150 to 189. So to cover the 190 to 193, we're going to need a separate case over here. And in fact, whoops, this is not an IDE, so it's not going to allow me to do that. Yeah, we want something like this. Okay, or a 1, and then a 9, and then a 0 to 3. Okay, so I think this is covering all the cases it's supposed to and not covering all the cases it's supposed to not cover. The only problem in here is that it has a gross amount of capture groups happening, and they're all happening completely unnecessarily. I only put these parentheses in here because we wanted to just group these things together the way we were before, so that we know, for example, it's not like just the first digit that could have the start of the string associated with it. So because I don't want these to be capture groups, I'm going to convert them into those fun little emoticons we saw earlier. And whoops, that one wasn't supposed to be winking. There we go. So that looks better, I think. That no longer has any capture groups. So yeah, that seems good to me. It's a very large regular expression compared to what we're used to, but I have to say I like that a lot more. I like look at how much we're going to be able to replace. We'll just be able to say const HDT check is assigned the value of this very large regular expression dot test HDT, and that's all there is to it. So now we have basically just 3 check-in ranges, and we've got 4 regular expression ones. And then, okay, so first of all, let's make sure that's still working. So we should expect the exact same result as the last time we called it. And that's what we're getting, yeah. So we got all trues, then we got 1 false, and then 1 thing in the filtered list. So that's just what we want. There's just one more thing I want to do, and I'll switch over to the full IDE for this. There's just one more thing I want to do before we actually send this off to the official submission department. And it's basically, notice we've got like results, which is this list here, this object containing all these things. And notice also the way this object is formed. So this is an ES6 thing where basically if we just put in a single variable name, it will use the name of that variable as the key and the value of that variable as the value. So that's really convenient when you want to convert a bunch of things into an object. Okay, so the question is, like, we saw some really nice ways we could use like reduce and stuff like that, right? We saw lots of nice array built-ins, right? For an array, we found there are lots of built-ins that we can use to sort of combine them, merge them all into one thing. The question is, do we have those same kinds of built-ins for objects? And the answer, at least as far as I know, is very much no. It turns out we don't have those kinds of functions for objects. And it's a shame because we actually want to take all these values and basically just condense them. In fact, we could just say like dot every, right? Yeah, I think. Or something like that. Anyway, the point is we could do something like this. So basically, if we wanted to take an object and do some sort of a reduce or a filter or a map on its values, we can convert the object into an array and then just use whatever array built in that we need, okay? So since we only want the values here, we don't care about the actual names of them in the end, we can use object.values, okay? We also have similar built-ins for object.keys, and there's one that actually gives the key value pairs as 2-element arrays, and it's called .entries. Anyway, we're gonna use the .values on results, okay? So now if we look at our console logs, it should just say like true, 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 false, true, true, true for the other one. So yeah, there we go. It's what we expect, right? Object.value of results. And then we could do this and just say like, you know, .every, and then each of these is a Boolean, and we want to return that Boolean, you know, whether it's true or false. Okay, so we could do that, and Yeah, it's as simple as that. It's true or it's false. That's really all we care about, right? So this is the thing I want to return in the end. We could do our console log to get our results down here, and that would just be sort of like for error checking purposes, but really, ultimately, in the end, the thing that we want to return is this, okay? Object.values, blah, blah, blah. Okay, great. So now, if we save that, we should find that we just get a single entry. Yeah, that's it. We just get a single entry. It filtered out all the rest of them. So this right here is the only thing that we're console logging. Why don't I go ahead and just give this a name? Let's say const valid passports is assign the value of this. Yeah, okay, good. Very good. So yeah, this is looking good. We've got, I think I can delete this now. I'm sick of looking at it. Okay, cool. So we've got the thing that converts our data into nice organized objects, you know, JSONs, the way we love to receive data. And then we've got this nice little helper function, which will help in the validity check. We've got our completeness check, just making sure all the right keys are there. We've got our validity check, which is actually going through each of the keys and doing, or actually going through the values of those keys, I should say, and doing a unique validation for each of them. And then we have this results thing. We're mainly keeping this so that, like, yeah, for example, we could just return results. Like that could be the thing that we're returning here. And then within this, we could say, like, instead of just validity check, we could do like object.values.every of validity check instead of just results. That's another option. I mean, it's really, it's up to you. Yeah, it's really up to you. Anyway, lots of choices for how we could do this. I mean, no surprise, right? That's pretty typical of programming. There are lots of ways to solve the problem. So let's go ahead and officially submit this, shall we? I can't wait. So let's go back to Advent of Code. And we're going to need our fetch code first. So we're going to get our response and our response text, which we had before, but of course, we navigated away from that page, and so we sort of lost our code, but that's okay. We didn't need it anyway. Okay, required keys we're going to need, input list we're going to need. I think we're going to need all this stuff except for the response text, or the sample response text, I should say. Okay, cool. So now we should be able to do this and then just say valid passports.length. Okay. Valid passports. Well, we can already sort of see what the length is. It's going to be 123. Nice. Okay, and I mean, should we explore? Should we take a look at what's in here? What kinds of things are in here? Oh yeah, these look valid. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Is that a valid hair color? Yeah. Okay, looks okay to me. Yeah. Okay. I think this looks decent. So, excuse me. 123, does that seem reasonable? I don't really know. It really depends on, you know, it's not just like random data, right? So like, I think a lot of them are supposed to be correct. So we'll see. 123. Yeah, looks good. Let's go ahead and submit that. There we go. That's what we love to see. Okay, nice stuff. So that's it. We've got it. Congratulations, we found a way to solve the problem. So what did we learn from this one? Well, I mean, we learned that even though it seems a little tedious, it can be a lot of fun to go through data validation, and also that there are sort of multiple ways we can do this. And actually, you know, if you think about it, in all of my previous videos, I had a question for you, dear viewer, and this one is going to be no different. So in this case, I guess you could say my question this time is actually maybe something more of a challenge. So I challenge you, dear viewer, to attempt this problem in such a way that the entire validity check, maybe even the entire completeness check, let's say all of this stuff, do it in one regular expression. That's your challenge, should you choose to accept it. I'll see you in the next video. And between now and then, remember to believe in yourself. Anything's possible.